Good morning, Bimblers, and you join me by the K6 telephone boxes in Warrington Town Centre. It's very early and there's still people out from the night before. But today we're going to the Cheshire Steam Show and we're having a bimble on the way, so I've had to be up early. Anyway, K6 telephone boxes are nothing. There's a K4 down there. Let's bimble. If you recall, a few bimbles ago, we visited Antrobus, and in that bimble, we spoke about the red telephone box. It was designed by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott, and Sir Giles Gilbert Scott was from a long lineage of architects and designers. You have his dad, Sir George Gilbert Scott Jr. I think he designed Norwich Cathedral. And then you have his uncle, Adrian Gilbert Scott. I think he designed a church in Llandudno. Then you had his granddad, Sir George Gilbert Scott, you know, the George Gilbert Scott, the daddy of all the Victorian architects. But Sir Giles, he was no slouch either. He designed Battersea Power Station and the Forth Road Bridge and the Anglican Cathedral in Liverpool and the telephone box. In my opinion, he supersedes his granddad. The first telephone box he designed was the K2 telephone box. K stands for kiosk, by the way. That's your classic red telephone box that you find down in London. The big tall ones, 9 foot they are. It's what you think about when you think about the big smoke. You think about red buses, red telephone boxes, and beefeater bears, don't you? The smaller red telephone boxes, the ones that you see everywhere else, they're the K6 telephone boxes, and Sir Giles Gilbert Scott designed those as well. Because they were smaller, they could make more of them, and that's why you had more telephone boxes around the UK. If they were using those big 9 foot ones, well, they would only fit where you could fit a 9 foot telephone box, wouldn't they? This telephone box behind me, though, is a K4 telephone box. Now, Sir Giles Gilbert Scott didn't actually design this particular telephone box, but clearly it's took inspiration from his original design for the K2. They look very alike. This one was designed by the post office because it's a special telephone box in that it has a post box and a stamp machine built in. But the K4 telephone box, it wasn't very popular. Apparently it didn't work very well. The stamp machine inside used to interfere with the receiver, and if it rained, all the stamps would get wet. You got to remember back then, all the stamps were the licky type. So once they'd been licked, that was it. They only built 50 K4 telephone boxes. That's in comparison with 35,000 K6 telephone boxes. That's why you see loads of them. There's actually only 10 of these K4 telephone boxes that survive, and only 4 of them are out in the wild. That's one at Whitley Bay, one at Tunstall in Yorkshire, one by the train station in Frodsham, and one here in Warrington, where Mr Smith's used to be. You remember Mr Smith's? That's where they filmed The Hitman and Her with Pete Waterman and Michaela Strachan. So Pete Waterman might have had a pee in this telephone box. You never know. Let's bimble.
I made a bold decision, no different from the time before. Brimming with the sun's condition, swept overboard. I'm with the wind's incision, cutting through our mold.
And so we reached Centre Park here in Warrington. Not Centre Parks, that's a much different thing. Centre Park in Warrington is a business park filled with offices and things. But it wasn't always a business park. It used to be something called Arpley Meadows. And at one end of Arpley Meadows, you had Thames Board Mills Paperworks, which is a perfect place for a paper works, right on the banks of the River Mersey. You need a lot of water to make paper. There's a very apt story about Thames Board paper mills and Arpley Meadows, seeing as we're going to Cheshire Steam Fair. On the 14th of September 1940, Thames Board Mills was having a summer fete, you know, with egg and spoon races and a tombola and sandwiches and candy floss and things like that. But at around 5 o'clock, a German bomber came. It was 1940 after all, peak World War II. Apparently it had been using the Manchester Ship Canal to navigate itself back out to sea. And on its way through, it decided to drop 2 bombs. 16 people died that day, including some children. And 150 people were buried in the wreckage. And 15 of those people were seriously injured. It was a terrible affair. There are first-hand accounts kept at Warrington Museum, made by people that seen the bombings happen. There was a Yvonne and Doreen who were out on a bike ride, a wartime bimble, and they seen this great big bomber coming over, which they thought was a French plane. They said it had French markings on it. There's another account by a Stan Evans, who was over at the Ritz Cinema, which became Mr Smith's nightclub, and he was watching a film at around 5 o'clock. And he remembers the whole building shaking as if there was an earthquake, and nobody watching the film knew what had gone on outside, but apparently they all kept watching the film. So it's a very apt story, considering we're off to another summer fete, the Cheshire Steam Fair. Hopefully no German bombers flying over, just German hot dogs and maybe some German shepherds. Let's bimble.
Perfect choice. Moods can be lifted the brighter the day. You take the blue skies and I'll take the grey. If it's up to the weather, you know that I surely would say she loves them. You can love a woman, that's okay. You can love the sun in every way. You can love the breeze and blow away. She loves the rain. She loves the rain. It's made in perfect measures, dripping from a seal black sky. Soaking up this perfect treasure, I know it's right. Moods can be lifted the brighter the day. Take the blue skies and I'll take the grey. It's up to the red.
Whilst we're talking about fetes and galas and all that kind of thing, steam shows and that, what about a circus and the fantastique? According to Warrington's legendary storyteller, Wally Barnes, there's a tale that goes back to 1909. A bargeman by the name of Barry Gleave left the ship inn on Chester Road. The ship inn's gone these days. It was knocked down in 2015. It's some posh houses now. Anyway, Mr Gleave was on his way home when he came face to face with a Red Indian chief, or to use modern parlance, a Native American. Mr Gleave said that the Native American pointed towards the fields and then disappeared. Obviously Barry Gleave was very shaken by this, and he had to go back to the ship inn and have several more stiff drinks. But a week or so later, a Mrs Ewell, the local midwife, she came out of someone's house after delivering a baby, and she seen the Red Indian chief stroke Native American in all of his regalia, headdress, face paint, all very politically incorrect, you know what I mean? The last sighting of a Native American was made by a Desmond Pryor. He was a Methodist preacher, and apparently he seen the Red Indian chief on Christmas Eve while it was snowing, and again he pointed towards the fields and then disappeared. But why would there be a Red Indian chief or a Native American on Chester Road in Warrington? Well, apparently a few years before, a circus came to town, Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West Circus, with real Red Indian chiefs off the plains apparently. And by all accounts, there was an accident involving a horse that threw one of these Native American chaps off, and he broke his neck, and he later died. So was that the ghostly figure? The fella that died at the circus? Or was it one too many in the shipping? Or drinking the surgical spirit? Or having your own private holy communions? I think it was probably that, wasn't it? Let's bimble.
You can love the sun in every way. You can love the breeze and blow away. But she loves the rain. She loves the rain. It's made in perfect measures, dripping from a seal black sky. Soaking up this perfect treasure, I know it's right. Moods can be lifted, the brighter the day. Take the blue skies and I'll take the grey. If it's up to the weather, you know that I surely would say she loves that. You can love the warm, that's okay. You can love the sun in every way. You can love the breeze and blow away. She loves the rain. She loves that. She loves the rain. You can love the warm and that's okay. You can love the sun in every way. You can love the breeze and blow away. But she loves the rain. She loves that. 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 She loves the rain.
And so you join me at All Saints Church in Daresbury. We've bimbled here in the past. It's the church that Lewis Carroll's dad was the vicar of. So we don't need to go on about it again. But we've actually just come here because it's a convenient place to lock up Saracen. And it's also a convenient place to meet up with my executive producer, Molly Gallimore, and her chauffeur, Mrs Bimble, because they're coming to the Cheshire Steam show today as well. It's a family affair. But they're not going to be here for another half an hour, so I guess I'll just look at the church. I hope my two girls don't take too long to get here. I can hear the steam organs going. That's like a red rag to a bull to a nerd like me. They're all having steam-based fun without me. Gonna look like we're going church now. Don't park, don't park. Wait, where you going? Stop. In we get. And what is everyone listening to? I hear it's available on Spotify and iTunes now. Oh, matching Daddy and Molly. You can shine now. What's that fairy thing? No, not Daddy.
Yeah, look at that big one in front of you.
Apparently the Cheshire Steam Fair has been going about 30 years. I've only been once before, in 2019. I wanted to come the next year, but that was 2020 and nothing happened that year, did it? In 2019, I seen Fred Dibner's van. And I also went and seen Ken Fox's Wall of Death. Ken Fox apparently learnt the Wall of Death from a fella named Roy Crispy. Roy Crispy had been touring the Wall of Death all around South Africa. And then for some reason, he got a residency in Skegness. And where they were doing the residency was right opposite Ken Fox's house, where he lived with his mum and dad. Obviously Ken was interested, and eventually he started doing the Wall of Death for Roy Crispy. And he also went and toured around Africa. And when he came back from Africa, he struck out on his own. And these days, he's the last man standing. He's the last Wall of Death company going. And he has 2 Walls of Death. He has the original one, which is run by his son Luke, and he has a new one, which is run by him. Obviously at Cheshire Steam Fair, you have quite a few steam engines, and steamrollers, and traction engines. They really came to prominence in the early 1800s. And did you know, for many years, they used to just pull them by horses. They didn't really think that you could use the steam engine to move the steam engine. It was a lad called Thomas Evelyn that came up with a movable traction engine using the steam engine to move the steam engine. He eventually made a company called Evelyn and Porter, which, to be honest, is the only traction engine company I know the name of. I don't know a lot about them, but I know I like them. And I like the smell of coal, and I like steam organs, and I like fairground rides, and I like ice cream, and I like bacon butties. So it's actually perfect for me.